This channel is for educational purposes only. Please do your own due diligence before making any investment decisions.
Hi, this is Joe Rabil, and we're going to talk about trading pullbacks today. I want to make sure you understand this key concept of how and what to look for. And also, I want to make sure you get the fact that we're trying to find the tradable trend. And it could be in a different time frame that you think. All right. So if you want to trade one specific time frame, sometimes you have to sit on your hands because that's not the tradable trend. We're going to go through that in detail. All right. And now, if you have an interest in learning more about some of these techniques, you can start with my book. You can click the link in the description to find out more. Also, if you do enjoy this content, please hit that like button and also subscribe. We're going to start out with the chart of Agnico Eagle Mines with a monthly chart in the bottom left, weekly in the bottom right, daily in the upper right, and hourly in the upper left. All right. Now, we're looking for a pullback in the trend. All right, but let's just start from the beginning of this move because this is really the way I like to look at things. So you can see this monster base that formed in AEM, and then we got a very strong move on the monthly chart where it broke out, right? But it never really offered an opportunity to buy on a pullback after that on this time frame. All right. Now, I do want you to understand you can buy pullbacks from a flat breakout. So we have a pattern that's going sideways. We can get a breakout pattern and we can look for a pullback there. All right. If it's a really strong pullback, we can get that initial thrust and buy a pullback. That is okay. I know typically we're looking to buy in a trend, right? A pullback in a trend, but this initial play here is pretty powerful. We did not get that in this chart, at least on the monthly chart, where it just took off and it was a breakout play and then it just continued to the upside. All right. Now, obviously, if we look at the weekly, we get a different picture where it broke out and we got that first pullback. Now, typically, the way I look at it is if I miss the breakout play, then I'm going to play the weekly and look for a pullback. And I don't take trades off the monthly. Very rarely do I do that. So we're using the weekly anyway, and we're going to use the risk on the weekly. And you can see we got this monster breakout, and we did get a nice pullback to the 18. All right. Now, if you notice what happened, and what we know is there's a couple of things we need to know for if we're looking for what time frame is the tradable trend. All right. And that is, number one, you want to make sure it has a rising moving average. All right. So if you look at the 18 here, it was flat down and then it started rising. Okay. You can see this 18 is moving up. All right. So it qualifies. All right. Now you can also see on the weekly chart, this had the 18 rising. And one thing you can look for is support from the 40. All right. If the 40 is moving up at about the same rate, they look almost parallel, then you know you have a nice little trend on your hands. All right. Now, number two is you want to have confirmation in MACD and ADX. Okay. Now, both of these time frames are actually meeting these criteria, rising 18 there, and we have good confirmation from momentum. Where the monthly falters is we don't get pullbacks in the area of the 18, right? We never got a pullback in the area of 18. Here's a pullback here. Here's another pullback here. This one actually turned into a little bit more complex. And if we keep moving forward, you can see we got another pullback to the 18, another pullback to the 18, right? So we have multiple opportunities in the area of the 18. Now, I'm not saying you're going to catch every one of these. Some of these happened really quickly. And, it's the type of thing where we're recognizing that we have a trend that has good momentum characteristics, and it's offering opportunities at or near this line. Okay, now it can be a little bit above, it could be a little bit below, but that all qualifies. Now, when I look at this chart, you can see that we went through a pretty extensive period, about a year long, where the weekly chart was in command. And then if you notice recently, just starting in July, this kind of took off and it's not pulling back to the 18, at least it hasn't yet. And it's kind of broken out of this little channel it was in. So if we look up, we can see what happened. Now, if you notice what's taking place, we got higher highs and higher lows forming here, but look at what's happening now. We have an 18 above the 40 and both lines rising. So we broke out of this little area, and now we're getting pullbacks to the 18-day. So this has turned, so the tradable trend has now switched from the weekly to the daily. So it all depends. Like if you're a long-term trader, you might not necessarily take this trade. But if you do both, if you play weekly dailies and then you do, monthly weeklies and then you do weekly dailies, then you could switch. And if you recognize that now I'm not trading the weekly off the monthly, I am trading daily pullbacks. That is what I'm looking for. All right. So that's kind of the way I would look at it, just so you know, so you recognize what is the trend, what type of tradable trend do we have right now, all right? And it's possible, this is actually pulling back again, but if this were to jet away, let's say this were to jet away here, then we would be on the hourly, okay? So we want to realize that, and I want to show you something else. So let's just do this. I'm going to go back to AEM in a second, but let's just look at what's taking place in IONQ. So we had this move. We had lines basically parallel and rising. We had good confirmation here, and we got a pullback. So at this point in time, and we didn't know what was going to happen after that, but at this point in time, we had the breakout, and then we got that pullback. This was the tradable trend at that point, right? We got a pullback on that time frame, and obviously we'd be entering off of a smaller time frame. But the point is that this is forming the type of setup that we're looking for. Now, not long after that, we get 18 above the 40 on the weekly chart. So we have the 18 above the 40, and both lines are rising. And we have confirmation in MACD and ADX. Why? Because this is not divergence in my world, right? We reset. We reset when we go through these deep corrections like this, and this comes down to the zero line and this goes low, then we start over and we start this process all over again. So we hit a new high, this hit a new high. We start now, and we're looking for divergence from here, and really MACD confirmed that move, and then we consolidated, okay? Now, if you notice the way this played out, it just took off like a rocket. So you see how this exploded from here, and we didn't get a pullback, another pullback to the weekly chart, and we never got a pullback to the daily. You see how it just skyrocketed away? But if we skip a time frame, you can see we actually had multiple opportunities at the 18 on the hourly. Now, notice we've got momentum divergence in place, and it's causing a correction, and we're probably going to get our first pullback towards the 18-day. All right, so this is good to understand. You need to know what time frame you're truly trading, right? And you also need to know when it changes, because if you're going to sit back and wait for this, you're going to be waiting a long time. So you might need to either go to a different stock. If you want to play monthly, weekly, then you go find a different stock, or make an alteration in your plan and say, okay, I'll play when this shifts. I'm going to go ahead and play the weekly and the daily. All right. So the key is, we're looking for pullbacks to a rising moving average with confirmation in MACD and ADX, right? And then what I wanted to show, when we go back to AEM, you can see what's taking place. We get all these different pullbacks. They all qualify on the higher time frame. But if you look at them on the lower time frame, so this was the first pullback here, this pullback here. So you can see the way this played out. It was a zero line reversal with low ADX. It never crossed. So you can draw your downtrend line, or it would be more of a horizontal line here, and you're buying as it's crossing above that. Okay. If you wanted to, you could obviously have waited for the pinch play that happened after it. All right. So that's kind of one example. And then if you look at another pullback, so you see how this was a really crazy double bottom kind of reversal in the way that it played in bottoming pattern. And it did qualify because these lines were rising, and we got reverse divergence, it looks like. And you notice the ADX got low here. So we've been looking for some type of an entry in this area, and you probably would have looked at this as a higher bottom, right, where green is starting to take over again, and the MACD is starting to cross back over the zero line, right? So that's the type of thing. Now, this trade's really odd with a lot of gaps and everything, so it's not maybe the perfect example, but you'll get my point when I'm done. Now, if you look at this one, this was one of our kind of classic setups where we got a pullback and we created that kind of ABC, and it went in the zone and came out of the zone and then moved back up, and we had overrun, so we're not taking the first signal. But the nice part about this is that the first signal was coming into the zone, right? And then it came out and it didn't go to a new low. So the moment we crossed back above these highs, crossing back above the 40 or closing back above the 40, we knew we had a new buy signal, all right? So the point I want to make with this was the reversal off the low, all right? So if you look at the top side, so let's just look at it this way. So these are all pullbacks in the area of the 18 with a rising 18 and a rising 40, right? With maybe not every single one of these had momentum confirmation, but pretty good momentum overall, okay? So that's the higher time frame. The lower time frame gave you let's say there's 5 different pullbacks. You got 5 different variations of how this can play out on the lower time frame. And this is what I try and say. And from the moment I started this channel, I brought this up, that the lower time frame is always going to provide the different signals. You have to know there's 4 different variations in the way these play out, the way I've categorized them. And then there's countless ways it'll play out based on the MACD and the ADX. You have to get a feel for that. And once you do, and you're able to categorize them, I think it's going to make it'll be really powerful. You'll be able to get really good entry, and I think getting a really good entry is like 80% of the battle, in my opinion. If you get good entry and you start off right, you're typically a pretty good trader, meaning you'll trade well during that setup. You'll see the trade through if you get a good entry. All right. If you don't get a good entry and you buy at the wrong time, you're constantly watching it. You're constantly getting annoyed, like, okay, it's down, whatever. And you're not, it's like you can't take your eyes off it. That's when you know you got a bad entry. You did something wrong. You entered at the wrong time or something like that. But when you enter at the right time, you have total confidence in the trade and you see it through. All right, so those are the types of things. But the point I'm trying to make is this lower time frame is what makes trading difficult. All right, you get the ABCs, but they are so much different than they're every single time they look different. Every one of these are a different type of pullback. Okay, we got 5 different types, and because of that, you have to learn that lower time frame and study it. If you want to work with me, I mean, you can work one-on-one with me. I do still do that, but I got to tell you, this is the battle that you need to learn. All right, if you're going to play pullbacks. All right, you can get really good at it. I'm not saying it's impossible. You can get really, really good at it. I've seen guys do it. And they're starting from scratch and getting really good at this. So that's the keys of playing pullbacks. All right, let me know if you have any questions.